Welcome to Hail to the Podcast, brought to you by the Maize and Blue Review. We cover Michigan athletics for the Rivals Networks, which means you can find us conveniently at michigan.rivals.com. I am Trevor, McCue, Senior Editor, Maize and Blue Review, joined as always by Mr. Josh Henschke, Intel Insider and Publisher of Maize and Blue Review. And after last week's show ending, we thought it was appropriate that we introduce everybody to our special guest, Franklin. So
here he is. Hi. Here, say hi, Franklin. Say hello to everybody.
He is not a 35-year-old dog.
No.
Which I apologize. It was 31.
31-year-old dog.
Yeah. He is the oldest dog. So, he is 31 years old. So
here he is, the barker extraordinaire. This is who's causing all the ruckus.
A regular guest on our show. Good to see him on screen. No, he's a good dog, man.
He is the very best.
All right. So, yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, feel free to go back to our last episode where we spent the last 10 minutes talking about old dogs and a man trying to be a dog in China. And it was all started by Josh incorrectly saying Charles Woodson's name, a mistake I would never, ever make. So yeah. I did go back. I said Tyler Wilson. You were 100% correct. So
yeah, we all make mistakes. No one's perfect.
Excellent. All right. So obviously fall camp is underway. We are getting pictures and video and chit chat coming out of fall camp. Obviously they're in the submarine, so getting intel is tough, but we've got a few things to talk about today. Obviously pads went on once or twice this last week, Josh.
Yeah.
And there's not any real heavy physical contact. So no position battles are being won as we speak, but there's plenty to talk about there. And we'll go through the depth chart and some other questions, but those of you watching live, obviously in the YouTube comment section, this is going to be a good episode for Q&A. So feel free, throw some comments there and there, statements, questions, anything you guys want to talk about, throw in there. In regards to fall camp, we've got a lot of stuff lined up, but I think this will be a good day for you guys to help us guide the conversation a little bit. So we are going to start out with some of the chatter that we've had this week over at michigan.rivals.com has been about Jim Harbaugh and this impending suspension of sorts. Obviously, Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore were also mentioned to that as possible one-game suspensions. The four-game suspension talk conveniently came out right before Big Ten Media Days. You can draw your own conclusions on who would benefit from that coming out to decide why it was leaked when it was. But Josh has done some reporting in the last week. He said, it was looking less and less likely 4 games was ever going to be the case. Maybe it was 2. And you got some more news there. And at the end of the day, the theme continues to be the same. And that's Jim Harbaugh does not want to admit that he lied because he does not think he did.
Right. No, I mean, and we talk about even through, Jim Harbaugh's dances and flirtations with the NFL, that this guy is, truthful to a fault. And, in this case, he believes that he's telling the truth. And we don't know for sure if he's lying, who's not lying, all that kind of stuff. But, I think I think the big thing is that Harbaugh doesn't believe he's lying. And, he believes that he has evidence to support his cause. And, as does Michigan at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think this big thing has been about Jim Harbaugh basically stonewalling the NCAA, so to speak, not wanting to give them an inch, and maybe it's a little bit of, vindictive stuff to say, hey, there's so much other stuff going on in college football right now. Why are you focusing on, the events that took place in order to, have this NCAA investigation to begin with? But, from the people that I speak to, I mean, that 4-game number was never really a set in stone number. And the more as this thing goes on, the less and less likely it's going to be 4 games. I mean, there may be a possibility where he may not get any games at all. So, there's a couple of, there's moving parts all over the place. I've heard as many as Jim Harbaugh getting 2 games, to the point where, he might not get any games and just pay a fine. So I think at this point, I think the NCAA, if that was the number that they originally came out with, I think that's really the line in the sand. I think the 4 games is that's like the bottom tier of it. Now anything, they're not going to go over that. And now all they can do is go down. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see how this kind of all works itself out. And when this gets done, who knows at this point? Who knows? I think it'd be smart for all parties involved to get this done before the season starts. And, they're quickly running out of time to do that.
See, I think the NCAA knows that.
Yeah.
Like they at least feel like that would be beneficial to Michigan. And I think they think that's their leverage that they're trying to use to their advantage. Like, hey, just agree to this. We'll get it to go away, get it over with, and it's, again, we've talked about Jim Harbaugh. And if you know Jim Harbaugh at all and what his word means to him and his honesty, you'd have a really good understanding of what's happening here. I saw Bruce Feldman talking about this, comparing to the Tennessee situation, and I got angry all over again because the framing continues to be, Tennessee was really forthright with this information, and they feel like Jim Harbaugh misled him and blah, blah. Over 200 violations.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They were forthright because they fired him already because he didn't win games.
Exactly.
They were doing everything possible to protect their program and their current coach.
Yep.
And it's just, and they're still doing things in that vein, right? It's disgusting, right? Michigan reported 4 level 2 violations. Teams report and self-report these violations all the time. Right. Not a major deal. What they're hung up on is this idea that Jim Harbaugh lied to them because he couldn't remember what he had done 2 years prior. I know people get mad when we try to pretend this is just about a cheeseburger. I know it's not just about a cheeseburger, but it's just outrageous. And this is just a giant power move by the NCAA. And I think Harbaugh is willing. I mean, it's not a distraction yet. We're talking about it. Fans probably are. It's out there on message boards, but the team's not distracted by it, right? So until it becomes, it's funny, until it becomes a distraction for the team, I think Jim Harbaugh is willing to bet his character on this and not move off of it. I guess based on what the player said, I don't know how it would become a distraction really, unless we go to the press conference after the game and keep asking about it, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really any distraction parts to this because he's going to be there regardless of how many. If he gets 4 games, he's going to be there through the week. He just won't be there on game days. So really not a whole lot is going to change. I mean, they're going to have their game plan leading up during the week. They may just not have Harbaugh to say, hey, run this or hey, do this at that time, but that's where you lean on your assistants. This is, and again, which kind of draws everything back into, Grant Newsome and Sherrone Moore also getting involved in this as well, possibly getting 1 game. And from what I've heard, it appears that Grant Newsome is looking like, that it's just he may not get any punishment at all. And then, they're also, and Sherrone Moore's status is also up in the air as well. So, I don't think it's going to be a distraction. I don't think they can let it be a distraction. A, because of who they're playing against the first 4 weeks, and
right.
B, what they have to lose this year, which is a lot, which is everything. So, yeah, I mean, it all comes down to multiple moving parts that we really don't know what this is going to end up like here in a couple of weeks or heaven forbid months at this point. It all just comes down to, reassessing what's going to happen after, things are done and clear. And, I think best case scenario is that Harbaugh pays a fine. I originally said best case scenario was 2 games, but, now if we're talking about a possibility of a fine, then really that's nothing. And that's kind of, basically coming down to who blinks first, and that's the NCAA's blinked first. So at this point, and not even to mention they've got Tom Mars working this thing too, which has been a massive thorn in the NCAA side for a very long time.
Yeah,
so
it wasn't an accident that Ward Manuel and Tom Mars had the exact same statement. when this first got leaked out.
Right. Yeah. They're all working together, and they're going to find things that, they can present that'll help their case. It's all working that way. And yeah, that four game number was just that, a number. And this is a negotiation. So there's going to be all twists and turns until they finally get something that they're satisfied with. But, I don't think Harbaugh is going to say, you know what? No, I'll take 2 games. It's just there's going to be some finality to this, but not at the behest of Harbaugh. This is just going to be like the point where the NCAA is like, all right, fine, this is it.
Yeah,
we'll move on. So, I expect a couple more twists and turns here, but that 4 game number, I would be shocked if Harbaugh gets that 4 games at this point. It just doesn't look to be that way.
No, it feels like the NCAA blinked and made a decision to put pressure on Michigan and Harbaugh right before Big Ten Media Days. And Harbaugh, being the pro that he is, stomped it, right? And I thought his response, not only did he not keep the story going, but he made it really clear, like, I've got things to say.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a power move and a half, dude. Like, oh, yeah, I wish I could talk about this.
Well, this is why he's in the situation they're in the first place, because he's saying these things because he's got a lot to say. He's telling the NCAA to shove it. He's telling the NCAA to go find better things to do. And that's going to be the exact same type of messaging that he's going to say once he's allowed to, once the collar gets loose and he's allowed to, run out into the yard. He's going to say these things. But yeah, I mean, that you're exactly right. He's got things to say. He just can't say it right now. But there will be a time and place where he will, and I'm predicting a glorious takedown.
I'm excited.
The entire investigation.
I think this fired up the team. I don't think the NCAA has any leverage, and I think this is just going to open, like you said. Well, I was going to say open the door, but you made a very direct dog analogy, and I don't know if that's because you have Franklin with you or not. But
I do have to take him outside.
I was just going to say, speaking of letting the collar go, yes.
All right, Franklin.
Bye, Franklin.
Bye.
So,
okay, we're going.
As Franklin exits stage left, we're going to jump right into camp and football. We're going to talk about football, ladies and gentlemen. So, obviously, first week of fall camp was not intense, right? We had everybody showing up, kind of the general first day syllabus handout. And then on the second day, they were hitting the field and got into pads once or twice this week. But there's still some things to talk about. Obviously, there's a few position battles that I think are going to bleed into the season. CB2, we might not have an answer on that till week 8, honestly, right? They're going to rotate those spots a lot. I'm going to start first with the offensive line. Franklin never leaves, folks. I'm going to start first with the offensive line because there are 2 spots there that are very interesting to me as fall camp begins: left tackle and center. We're going to start with left tackle. Carson Barnhart was listed at the top of that depth chart because Ladarius Henderson wasn't here. And although a lot of folks expect him to win that job, Barnhart deserves to start with first team reps after he dominated in the spring, right?
Yep.
And then people started seeing some pictures and video of Ladarius Henderson coming out of camp this week. And I think people are starting to understand. As soon as he transferred in and I said, there's your left tackle, one that was kind of my thought too. I'm not going to lie. Some folks were telling us that, right? Everyone's like, oh, he played left guard. Are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. I know it's limited and it's only little clips, but now that people have seen how big Ladarius Henderson looks on a football field and how much of an athlete he is, I'm continuing to lock into, I do think Ladarius Henderson is going to end up being that left tackle. Barnhart's going to slide over to the right. We've seen some iron sharpen iron with Mr. Henderson and Derek Moore going up against each other in camp so far.
Yeah. No, I mean, that dude's there's a reason why, the Michigan coaching staff immediately went out and got him. I mean, he's just a big dude, and he's talented. And, there's a reason why so many people were high on him coming out of Arizona State, transferring to Michigan, because, if you're a transfer offensive lineman, there's not many other better places to be than in Ann Arbor right now with Sherrone Moore. So, I take all of this stuff, I call it stuff because your half pads, you don't have lower pads. There's no blocking below the legs. And it's very early stages. So I'm not going to take too much stock into short stuff right now. For Michigan's first scrimmage is scheduled for next Saturday. So that'll be a big tell because they're going to go full go. That's full go. So that'll be a big tell about where things are currently trending, and you'll get a better sense. But you talk about the eye test. Talk about a guy like, hey, what does this guy look like? Does this guy look the part? And Ladarius Henderson fits just that. I mean, he's definitely fits the mold.
He looks the part.
Yeah, no, there's no denying that. If you were to pick Ladarius Henderson out of a room, it'd be a very easy thing to do. But I mean, he's going to make a very, very tough decision for these coaches to keep, even a guy like Trente Jones off the field too. So it's good. Like the offensive line, I mean, that's you can't get much better than what it is right now. And we'll see how it shakes out. But I mean, a good first week, and for him to get back up to speed since not playing in the spring for Michigan. So yeah, things are picking up. They're going to be getting quick here very, very soon. And, they may even get into full pads before that Saturday scrimmage, but that's kind of the big day that I'm eyeballing big time is definitely that Saturday scrimmage for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just real quick, Ottawa Traveler says he looks small compared to Hinton from the clips I saw. King Kong looks small to Hinton. So
Yeah.
Hinton's 6'8", maybe 6'9".
Hinton he's a big dude.
Yeah, I don't remember what his new weight was because I thought he lost some, but he's 350 something.
That's that NFL stock for you.
Yeah, but
that runs in that family.
That's a big boy. Yeah,
did not skip a generation, that's for sure.
And it's crazy too because you brought up Trent Jones, who was the starting right tackle last season before he got hurt and Barnhart took over. Miles Hinton's a guy that's an NFL caliber tackle. Like literally, we've seen him already included in some, I don't remember, I think it was the senior, Reese's Senior Bowl. Yeah. That's 7 offensive linemen that they're targeting. Like there's a chance somebody on this offensive line won't play a ton and be in the NFL next year. Like that's how good this group is.
Yeah.
And one spot, the other real battle where that's the case, and it's a little bit different where it feels like Henderson's going to eventually take over the job. At center, Drake Nugent has gotten a lot of hype this offseason. Mm-hmm. Started with Pro Football Focus and some analytical services saying he's a top 10 interior offensive lineman coming back. Award season preseason watch list has started. He's been named on a few of those, and he's competing for a starting job right now. Yep. So Greg Crippen took advantage in the spring with Nugent rehabbing from an injury. He started camp off as the number 1 center again. Nugent had been around. That seemed fair, but they're splitting reps. First team reps right now. And Crippen has a legitimate shot at this job. Now, we've talked about the iron sharpens iron, right? Crippen pushing Nugent's good for Nugent. It's good for Crippen. They're going to let that battle play out. So, but is there a chance Drake Nugent is an Outland Trophy watch list, nominee and not starting come the fall?
I think for Michigan's case, I think it would be a really, really good thing if Crippen was good enough to beat out Drake Nugent. And I'm not saying like it's a bad thing if Nugent wins the job. I think you can't go wrong with either guy. But, if it's really that close and the Crippen does have a little bit of a leg up because he had the entire spring. But I mean,
he's been in the program for multiple years too.
Right. And the good thing, and that was going to lead into my next point too, is that
my bad.
No, I mean, he's been behind Oluwatimi. He's going to be learning with Drake Nugent. He's going to be he was around Vistardis. I mean, talk about a good back-to-back guy to learn from. I mean, that's an excellent group of guys to learn the center position from. So, if Crippen does end up being the guy, I think that's a very good thing. And I don't think you can go wrong if Crippen earns that job. But, if what Pro Football Focus says to be believed, then, Nugent is the real deal. So we'll kind of see how it shakes out. I think it's unfortunate that he missed the spring, but man, it's like if he can just come walk right in and kind of take a job from a guy who's an established guy inside the program that's kind of been steadily rising. I mean, I think that speaks a lot to his game too, but Michigan's in a great spot at the center position. And really, you can't really go wrong. I mean, and we're not even mentioning Raheem Anderson.
I was just going to say
very, very good in his own right in the future too. So, I think Nugent is a very, very good bridge guy, because you're not going to get him for more than 2 years. So, that's a bridge enough in itself where you can kind of trust your development, where guys like Crippen and Anderson you can just slot them in and not have to worry about, oh boy, do we go to the portal again? Or, I'm not really too sure if these guys have had enough time, but I mean, you've got back-to-back just excellent center candidates that for these guys to learn and pick their brains. It's, you can't think of a better situation right now, really.
I thought about someone the other day I completely forgot about, and that was former Michigan offensive lineman, Zach Carpenter. So Zach Carpenter started at center the last couple of games of 2020, thought he was arguably the leader to start in 21, potentially battle with Vastardis, and he ended up transferring to Indiana. And since he's left, what Michigan has done at that position is incredible. And I mean, props to Crippen, props to Anderson, Jeffrey Percy. I could name a whole bunch of names. A lot of people were talking about, what is the staff thinking, bringing in these 3 incoming transfers. Keegan and Zinter are back. You're going to scare off these recruits. A bunch of dudes are going to transfer out, and nobody left.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they all are willing to compete and fight for the opportunity to start. And if it's not this year, they know they can play whenever their time comes, even if it's just for 1 year. They're going to be on one of the best offensive lines in America. They have a chance to get to the league. Like, they're all willing to stay in battle for that. And I mean, the culture they've built, and that offensive line room is incredible. And no one's going to win a spot by default. I think that's a really good thing too. I think we've talked about offensive line battles in the past. I would argue Michigan's rival is Ohio State right now. There's some conversation. There's a couple spots where somebody might win a starting job by default.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the case anywhere here, whether it's, Henderson and Barnhart left tackle or Nugent Crippen. I do think it's going to be Nugent. But man, the fact that you don't know for sure, props to both of them. Right. Yeah. So
it's funny that, no, not to interrupt, but it's funny that you mentioned Zach Carpenter, because really that was the, I guess the original snowball that kind of rolled into what this is today. I mean, the bringing in Oluwatimi after Vastardis left was because they didn't have anyone to kind of step in right away. And then that opportunity for Oluwatimi to step in showed up. And now you're looking at Crippen coming in, and now, you also got, Nugent coming in, and then you've got Crippen involved too. This really, it's funny, I know people were freaking out at the time when Zach Carpenter transferred, but that was kind of the snowball that really started this whole thing. It's like this is the Michigan center success in the portal, and then the development as well. I mean, this was, without Zach Carpenter transferring, we might not have saw, a Oluwatimi come in, or even Nugent too. So funny that you mentioned that, because that is a good point.
Point. A friend of ours covers Nebraska. His name is Zach Carpenter, and I saw a tweet. I was super confused for a minute, because like, wait, Indiana. I looked up; he's still their starting center, and sent me down this rabbit hole. But anyway, and then my boy Zay just confirming, yes, Nugent and Miles Hinton were both rehabbing injuries this winter that bled into the spring, so they did not compete during spring drills. So the other spot on offense I wanted to talk about is maybe not as exciting this year as it has been in previous years. I think everybody's very, very happy with JJ McCarthy being the starter this year, but there is some debate about the backup quarterback. When Jack Tuttle, another transfer, first came in from Indiana, I think a lot of people thought he was going to kind of just replace, I always want to call him Alex Malzone, Alan Bowman.
Wow.
Yeah, Malzone. It's crazy. Malzone always pops in my head, which Bowman, by the way, is leading to start for Oklahoma State.
Good for him.
Awesome. Good for him. So cool. Yeah, you're going to have him, Cade, and Milton all starting at other spots. Pretty crazy. But anyway, people thought Tuttle was maybe coming in just to replace that leadership in the room. Probably was going to slot in as like the third or fourth QB. He's been pretty open about his path is probably to coaching now and why Michigan was a good opportunity. And then he was competing with Warren for the backup job. Harbaugh said Tuttle was probably the leader as the backup QB going into the spring game. Tuttle went against JJ first before Warren came in. So, and they both did good things. They both made some mistakes in that game. And against the spring game, we're not making any drastic conclusions. But if JJ's got to come out of a game in a second half and it is close or whatever it might be, and they have to go to one of these quarterbacks to keep national championship hopes alive, you know, a lot of people have high expectations for Warren. We've told his story. Obviously battled an illness and you know, he's a high 4-star QB if he had been healthy and COVID and everything. Just incredible story. Davis Warren's a great kid, has a bright future ahead of him, hopefully at Michigan, but wouldn't be shocked he could transfer somewhere else and start too. But where do you think that battle sits? And I don't even know. I've argued, I don't know that that's something they're going to figure out in camp, because I think who you go to might be situational. You know what I mean? But it's a topic, and we've seen not just those two. Jaden Denegal has been getting a lot of reps, and of course, we'll get to Alex Orji as well in that equation. But in terms of Tuttle and Warren, what is this team going to figure out in fall camp with those two?
Yeah, I mean, early suggestions say that Tuttle is going to be that guy for the number 2 spot, but really, I don't think it matters, to be honest with you. I mean, unless the unthinkable happens, you know, you don't really have to worry about your.
I just set up this whole question. You're like, I don't think it matters.
Honestly, I don't think it matters. Like, because again, I think you're right.
Anyway.
It is situational. You know, Orji's also going to be involved as well. He's going to have, you know, special schemes and packages and stuff for him. But yeah, I mean, I think you kind of really you want Davis Warren to have as much experience as possible, because you know 2024 might look vastly different than what it is today, because you know, who knows? I mean, JJ might go off and have a big year and become an NFL draft pick. So you know, for this year, right now, at this point in the fall, heading into the fall season, I don't think it matters all that much. You know, if you want, I guess, from an experience standpoint, to get a guy some snaps, probably Davis Warren is your best bet because he has more longevity than Tuttle has. But you know, Tuttle has the experience. So I think it all comes down to just situational stuff. You know, does Jim Harbaugh do the switch at halftime? You know, if the games are out of control, probably. Who that guy is, who knows? Because again, at the same time, you're going to see Orji come out in some points and stuff. So, you know, there again, I really long answer, you know, to make it short. I don't think it really matters, to be honest with you. But
and we're back where we started.
Yeah, but I mean, I do agree with the fact that they should have a backup, and maybe not a clear backup. I mean, they can still have a 2A and 2B. I think Davis Warren and Tuttle are, I wouldn't want to say similar in terms of trajectory. I think Warren has the higher ceiling, but they're kind of on the same plane right now. I mean, you're not going to get a whole lot of time, but I think, you know, if you're looking from a scale standpoint, I think Warren's ceiling kind of tips the scales in his favor a little bit. So,
well, and that's why I've said, I think if you're game planning for an entire week, if you know JJ is going to miss an entire game, I wonder if you go with Warren in that situation. But if you just need somebody to get the bus home, I wonder if you go with Tuttle in that spot. Yeah, that's why I think it might be situational. But all right, before we move on, I want to address something Zay said here. Where did it go here? Hold on. I brought up Alan Bowman, and he thinks you guys look alike.
Jeez.
So,
all right, cool.
Let me see here. Yeah, a little bit. No, not really.
Not really. I don't see it.
I'll have to find a better picture, but
yeah, no, I don't think any better picture is going to fix that.
Your swoosh is going the wrong way. The hairline got to go in the other direction, but
yeah, Yeah, we're swoosh brothers.
Zay just thinks anybody with slightly red hair looks similar, I guess.
Yeah.
That's all that is. But yeah, because anyway, wrapping up the QB thing, if JJ's out for an extended period of time, it doesn't matter who the backup is. You don't have a Cade McNamara on this roster, right? So real quick on the Orji stuff. People keep well, it's gonna be so much fun this year. People keep bringing up, using him in special packages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we're gonna see that early on in the year to let him do it? Will that bleed into the season? Because I still am torn on this about the idea of taking JJ McCarthy off the field, putting the ball in someone else's hands, and with the running backs you have. Corum was arguably the short yardage back last year. I'm not even going to say arguably, he was. We saw that in the Maryland game multiple times. You've got Edwards and Stokes and Hall and Mullings and Dunlap, right? So I like Orji's skill set. The dude's an absolute freak athlete. I think he can do some really good things on the football field, and you want to put him out there any way he can help the team win. But is it going to disrupt the offense? I think early in the season you can let him play, because why not? But like when we get into crucial games, are they going to really bring these out? I think of the Jabril Peppers thing. Novel concept, but when he's out there, like you're just telling everybody what's going to happen.
Right. I think you can make it work, but you can't be predictable because I mean the Jabril Peppers thing is a great example because you were essentially lighting it down on fire at that point because you knew what was coming. He was either running up the middle or he was, trying to bounce outside. There was no creativity with it. And I think Orji does a lot more than what Peppers did. I mean, not to downplay Peppers' impact and his athletic ability, but I think Orji can do a bit more. I don't think Peppers could throw the ball. And Orji has a bit of an arm on him too. So I think there's a lot more that you can do. You can get, an Orji and JJ McCarthy on the field at the same time. There's so many things this is terrible. You could do so many things at the same time. But I guess it all just comes down to, oh, this show has gone off the rails. It hasn't even been half hour.
You could do so many things.
You can. So much room for activities when Orji's on the field, or in the end zone. All right, so not to be 5-year-olds, but I think there are ways that you can utilize his skill set, and not make it so predictable. When you see Alex Orji out there, you don't think, oh man, this is going to be a run, or oh, this is going to be a slants or whatever. Just like with Blake and Donovan, I think there's ways that you can utilize them both on the field at the same time and kind of remove that predictability, so to speak. And
I'd almost prefer using him as a decoy, if anything, right?
Yeah, or a decoy too. Yeah, there's ways to do it, and you're not going to say, oh man, here you go, Michigan is wasting this second or first down or whatever. So, and again, it's not something. It has to be something that you game plan around. It has to be something that you did in walkthrough. It can't be something that you just pull out of your back pocket at some random point of a game and a random point of the season.
Yeah.
It has to be something where you can kind of look at a defense and exploit it using, whatever skill set Alex Orji has. So
that's a really good point.
I think there's ways that you can make it work and not fall into that Jabril Peppers, category of saying, oh, well, here comes this or stuff like that. So
even the Haskins Wildcat stuff that they did a few times, right? It felt like, screw it, let's try it.
Yeah.
Right? Same. And then there's the same thing with Peppers, right? So yeah, when you do it, being deliberate with it, I think that's a great point, because obviously JJ coming in 21 is a different situation, right? He brought something that Cade couldn't do. But there were a couple times where it kind of felt like, maybe it messed up the rhythm a little bit. But overall, there felt like there was always a good flow to when JJ came in. I remember against Ohio State, they snuck him in for that one play and hit Roman down the sideline, stuff like that. So, if they continue to do that, then fine. If it becomes a novelty thing, like you're trying to win the Big Ten, let's quit. Like, stop.
Right.
Make him a fullback if that's what you want to do, you know? But
I
anyway, I had to look it up, because I remembered Peppers throwing the ball once, incomplete, 0 for 1 in his career at Michigan, so he can't throw the ball. But Edwards can.
Yeah,
Edwards got that perfect QBR, son. So
it's true. Yeah, and so does oh man, what is his name? Mullings, Kalal Mullings. There we go.
oh my God,
He's
how did I
Kalal
forget about
Mullings has
that
got
play?
that too. I can't. His name totally slipped my mind there for a second.
Yeah,
But
Alex
yeah,
Malzone.
yeah.
All right. The other spot we'll talk about next, Eddie kind of dropped this in, so we'll go to the wide receiver room. A lot of people have been talking about the lack of receiver production, and that could be not necessarily an issue, but like when they talk about what does Michigan have to do to win a national championship, it's more from the wide receiver room. He says, why? We don't throw the ball as much as other teams. They block well. They're good players. When we throw, they do well. It's not a knock. I do think there's another level that they can
Of
go
course,
to.
yeah. I agree with that.
As much as Ronnie Bell was targeted last year, I've talked about this a few times with contested catches in traffic, just having that solid possession receiver. That might be a tight end. That might be Cormer Edwards this year. We'll have to see where JJ goes. Could be Tyler Morris. We'll talk about that, right? And then that deep threat, everything they wanted Andrell Anthony to be. It felt like they called the deep ball convenient, like at the right time a lot last year. Yeah. It was just, we've beat that topic to death about execution or whatever, but someone asked me recently, is there a weakness on this team? And I wouldn't call it a weakness, but I do think whether it's one solid number one or just that wide receiver group as a whole going up to another level, I do think that is essential for Michigan to really be in that national championship conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. It does feel like Michigan doesn't have the guy at receiver. They just have a bunch of guys. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because they've been that way for years. I mean, Michigan has won back-to-back Big Ten titles with guys, just guys. And that's okay. But yeah, I think in order to kind of take that next step nationally, compete with the big boys, you got to have that clear number one guy. And yeah, you can make the argument, well, they beat Ohio State twice and they've won the Big Ten. They've been in the college football playoff twice. Yeah, but they didn't get past the semifinal twice. And
we've seen, let's bring up what happened last year. TCU had a guy named Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, he was the difference maker.
Right? Like in those games, it's good to have that dude, man.
Yep.
So
100%. Yeah.
And I think Cornelius has to be the leader in the clubhouse. He's been here contributing for 4 years. He's been right with Bell every time Bell's played. He was wide receiver 1 when Bell was hurt in 2021. We've seen what he can do, like against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Right. That dig on the third down, turning upfield and getting a touchdown. Absolute game changer. If that play, Michigan loses if they don't convert that third down. No doubt in my mind. Getting loose and twisting a safety's legs on that other touchdown, right? Yeah. 2 other receptions. He's just got to be more consistent. Same thing with Roman Wilson. Like we've seen the flashes, but his 2 previous seasons are nearly identical statistically. And it felt like he was going to take a big leap early in the year, and then he kind of just wasn't around a ton. But yeah, whether he was in the Z role in 21 or slot role in 22, which we think he's going to play again this year, he's a guy that gets 30, 35 balls, 400 yards, handful of touchdowns. But can he be the guy? I think some people believe that. I'm looking at the sophomores, though. Well, go ahead. What were you going to say on Wilson?
No, I think that Cornelius has that ability to be the guy. I mean, he runs really good routes.
100%.
He's a technician with the route running. He's just, again, it's funny that we mentioned this last week. If Michigan converted on like 50% of those plays that it missed on, we'd be talking about a completely different passing offense. So yeah, it's situational as well. But at the same time, yeah, you got to have a guy that come and, take over that role. And you're right. I think, Cornelius has that capability. He's a crisp route runner, can get separation. Roman Wilson, we all know who he is, and he's quick and can get open. I think his biggest thing is availability. I think Roman Wilson, the best availability you can provide a team is availability. And it's not his fault. He was hurt. He's been hurt. It's just, every time you think his game is going to take a next level, he's had an unfortunate injury that's kind of set him back.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah, and last
looked
year
like he was going to be the dude in 21.
Yep.
Had the couple big games, Wisconsin, Penn State, and then he gets hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, had a huge game against Hawaii, and then after that got hurt and just couldn't get back into who he was, which not his fault. I mean, it happens. So, Yeah, I think having those guys healthy will be huge. Yeah, Tyler Morris, yeah, like you're going to mention the sophomores, I think those guys are going to have a big impact as well.
Guys are talking about the depth chart a little bit in the comments. We do have our depth chart updated pre-fall camp based on some intel we've received over at michigan.rivals.com. I don't think I'm going to drag it up right now, but just so we're clear, what we're hearing right now is Cornelius is maintaining that X role, Wilson staying in the slot where he took 90% of his snaps last year. And again, these guys move around a ton. Nobody's pegged into anything.
Right.
But Tyler Morris right now is expected to be the starting Z receiver. He's switched to number 8. Coaches made some jokes about looking like Ronnie Bell, but in all seriousness, he should be a step above him. I don't know if he's going to do that this year, but he has that kind of ceiling.
Yeah.
Morris is arguably a better route runner. He's better at tracking the ball, something Ronnie Bell was really good at, those over the shoulder throws, right? But again, I don't know if Morris can be wide receiver 1 this year, but he is capable of it. And then Clemens is splitting time with him in that Z role, which I think just screams what you've been talking about, executing the deep throws. I think Clemens is going to be what Andrell Anthony was supposed to be last year, right? So you lead towards the veterans, right? With it being Cornelius and Roman's added a little weight, and he looks good. And Cornelius, man, let's be honest. You know what the perk of a 5th-year guy coming back is? That's a grown man. Right. Like he just is. You're talking about a 22, 23-year-old. Like, it's just a massive advantage, whether it's him on the offensive line. You've got, guys like Keegan, Chris Jenkins, right?
Yep.
So it's tough to project a sophomore who did not play a ton last year rising over either one of them. But I think he can make the case for Morris or Clemens, not only being wide receiver 3, but maybe getting into that 1 territory. I think the 4 could be evenly split, but do you have, I don't know, do you think either one of them could be the guy this year, or where do you kind of see their roles coming into the season?
Maybe. I kind of look at them as not necessarily 2 different kinds of players, but 2 guys that can be utilized in different ways. I think Tyler Morris has the 100%. Ability. I think Morris has the ability to be the shorter to intermediate game. Has crisp, like Cornelius has crisp route running, but has really good hands. And so you can kind of get him on the post and dig routes and all that kind of stuff and have him be reliable in that situation. But I think with Clemens, I think you can kind of go deeper. I think you can get him out. I think he's got the athleticism to, and we've seen flashes of it. Obviously, that big spring game touchdown. I mean, it is the spring game, but that kind of play takes talent to make, regardless of who you're up against. I think Clemens can be that type of guy. And I'm not saying that he's bad at the short to intermediate routes. And we just haven't really seen what Tyler Morris can do outside of those shorter routes to kind of really have a full opinion. So I think those 2 guys can be utilized in different ways. And I think, when you're talking about the long ball specifically, Clemens is athleticism can really put him ahead in that regard. And, that way you're not, limiting one guy's ability on the field because you've got, Tyler Morris who can do it all. That way you can technically still have both guys on the field at the same time and, play and kind of, see how things go from there. So I think both guys are going to get equal opportunities and equal not necessarily equal snaps, but the same amount of opportunities to go out there and make plays because, they both excel at different things, but just need a opportunity to show them. And I think that's, Morris earned his opportunities towards the end of the year, rightfully so. And I think, Clemens just needs that opportunity, and he's got plenty of chances to do it this year. So, both of those. I mean, if best case scenario for Michigan's wide receiver group is both Morris and Clemens step up and have huge years. I mean, I think you're in a really, really good spot if that happens.
Yeah, 100%. Clemens is just so built to be that top receiver, and I think he had a difficult year last year, and I think that's going to be a really good thing. He came in just being hyped as someone can get right from the get-go, right? The physical shape he was in, the work ethic, how he was learning from guys, and has the monster spring game, goes into the summer thinking like, I'm going to be one of the dudes, and then doesn't play a ton and just kind of crapped out a little bit. Right. And had that mental check. So I think having that early in his career is a good thing going through this offseason coming in. And yeah, I think if he's going to be the deep ball guy, if he goes up, he just needs, like in golf, man, once you make a couple putts and you see the ball go in the hole, right? I think once they just connect on a couple, they're going to be able to build off of it. So I'm excited to see the receivers and how they use them and rotate them. But a guy I want to plug into this conversation real quick, because I don't think we've really given him the hype he deserves in terms of the passing game. That's Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
A tight end has been second in receiving on this team for the last 2 years. I think it was third the year before that, right? They're going from, we expected it to be all in Schoon last year. All's obviously gone early with an injury. Schoon dealt with some injuries. Loveland was a guy we picked as, somebody who could contribute, but I don't think any of us thought he'd be such a factor against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, etc.
Right.
But adding AJ Barner to be your inline guy, to be the Schoon, the guy that can block and can still do the same receiving thing Schoon can, allows Colston Loveland to be what he is. And that's a wide receiver in a tight end's body, right? There's a chance Colston Loveland is the leading receiver on this team this year.
I believe it. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily so far-fetched. I think, you can. I do think he needs to work on his blocking, and that's been a priority for him this offseason too. But
for sure,
you don't want to take away his strengths, and that's his receiving capabilities. That not necessarily Brock Bowers type of receiving ability, but a guy that can do it all. Brock Bowers is a freak. I'm not trying to compare Loveland to Bowers, but
I compared Loveland last year. I was on Dennis's show, and before the season kicked off, I said he could be like a Kyle Pitts kind of tight end, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Too high of praise early on, but. Again, just a tight end who's actually
can be. He absolutely 100%. Can be. Yeah, he's
making me look good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, he's got that receiving capability, and Barner is capable of receiving as well. So, you've got both of those guys that you can do a bunch of different stuff with, and I don't think you necessarily have to worry about them blocking either, because I think at Michigan blocking is a mindset, and that's something that these guys learn quickly. And so there's so many things you can do with Loveland too, and you can bring him outside, you can leave him in the block. It's just I don't think it's a bad prediction to say that he could lead the team in receiving yards. It's definitely him and JJ seem to have a really good connection towards the end of the season. So if he can kind of hone in things in a little bit and become more well-rounded, but at the same time still keep his athleticism and his receiving abilities, you could be talking about a Mackey Award finalist. He's got that kind of talent for sure.
Yeah, a guy that can get loose from defenders. You can get him in the seam, in the flat, and then we saw that back shoulder touchdown against Purdue, double teamed, right? And again, I think we talk about this all the time, and Jesse Mentor said it, and it's just stuck with me like crazy. All these guys have these high ceilings. It's about doing that every time, like reaching that level of consistency, right? So I am interested to see, Joel Honigford was a former offensive lineman, converted tight end. They basically used him like a sixth offensive line a lot last year. I'll be interested to see if Barner can do that and still be the receiving threat. Barner is a red zone threat and a half, man.
Yeah.
He was a great receiver at Indiana. So you can't forget about him. But whether it's Hibner or Marlon Klein or Zach Marshall's a guy that's getting a lot of freshmen who could be that kind of next level too, right? They'll probably go 6 O-linemen more than using when the big tight end package because of how deep the O-line is. There's going to be an O-lineman that's on the field a lot as the sixth offensive lineman. But Loveland can line up anywhere. Yeah. And if they start just treating him like an extension of the wide receiver room, he's probably got a chance to be second or third receptions, receiving yards anyway, if the offense doesn't change one bit. But if JJ starts to feel like that's where the security blanket is, then watch out, man. Loveland could be the top dude on this team. So
absolutely. 100%.
We've talked about every spot on the offense but one. So we're going to go ahead and finish with talking about the running backs. Corum is healthy. Saw that first video of him making kind of a stiff cut. It was only about a half second in there, but I watched it a few times. That was good to see, man. Corum's feeling good. He says he's stronger. He's faster. Donovan Edwards, you can never, if you ever want a good Mike moment, man, you talk to Donovan Edwards. He's going out there saying he is going to be like the next Barry Sanders. Like I'm going to be a first round pick. Like the man believes in himself, right? Like he's feeling really good heading into this year. So you know what you've got with them. The question is behind, right? You brought up Kalel Mullings, the perfect passer rating. Kalel Mullings now full-time at running back. Him and Dunlap maybe doing something with that short yardage situation. But I think the real battle is CJ Stokes versus the star of the spring game, Benjamin Hall.
Yeah.
Handicap this a little bit. As good as he looked in that spring game, that's second, third, fourth teamers he's going against, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, like not to discount it, right? Hall got a lot of slack from dudes like us throughout the recruiting process. During the bowl practice, there were some clips going around where he didn't look exactly stellar. Hall was given a tough sled coming into this program, and he showed up in the spring in incredible shape.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of running backs were dinged up, and he took full advantage of that opportunity, and he was penciled in as RB3 starting fall camp. Stokes coming back from an injury as well. Shocked some folks last year when he was named RB3, right? But it's worth remembering he had almost 300 yards rushing and a 5-point yard per carry average as a freshman. That's better than Corman Edwards had as freshman.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
Again, not a bad problem to have. I think I like both those dudes, but where do you think the RB battle is? And that's another one. Could be week 8 before we really know who's actually the third running back, right?
Yeah, that one's interesting. I mean, I think they're at a point, Michigan's at a point now where, you have what you have in Corman Edwards, but do you kind of spend more time looking towards the future, knowing that you're more than likely not going to have Corman Edwards there?
Yeah, that could be RB1 and RB2 next year.
Yeah. Do you dip into, the future a little bit and kind of get Stokes' confidence up and get Ben Hall's confidence up? I think Stokes' big issue last year was confidence, and had a couple of unfortunate fumbles that really kind of derailed what could have been a really good year. But I think it taught him a lesson to kind of really take care of the football and for him to know, like, hey, this isn't, high school ball anymore. I mean, this is the real deal. So if he can learn to do that, I think he'll have a very nice career in Ann Arbor. But yeah, at what point do you say, hey, because Harbaugh's mentioned this before, he's going to have to you're going to have carries for Corum. You're going to have carries for Edwards, but you haven't had a healthy Edwards and Corum for a whole season ever. So at what point do you say, hey, we got to dip into the future here a little bit to see what we have? And yeah, it could be, a Stokes Hall combo. It could be a Tavi Dunlap. It could be a Cole Cabana who missed most of spring with a knee injury, but is back to full strength. So they're deep. I mean, they're deep in the running back spot, but with two main guys that you're going to require the ball, I just don't know how you're going to split that up, but also prepare for the future and get these guys some snaps. So there's a lot of interesting things at play, but yeah, I think, you're talking about immediate future. I mean, Stokes is probably going to be your number one guy, at least if there's, if they don't find some stud out of the portal or whatever, I think, Stokes is going to be the number one guy. But, as account 22 says here, there's only so many carries.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's right. There's only so many carries to go around. There's only so much time in a game, and not every game is the same. And even if you plan on heading into a game with saying, hey, we're going to play Stokes in the third quarter. Well, Michigan may be down by 4 in the third quarter and doesn't want to risk that. So there's just so many variables that go into that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I do think they should, and this isn't something that, this isn't anything that they're not talking about, but, I do think this is something to be they're consciously thinking of about the future, the next year, they're going to have to kind of turn over the depth chart essentially. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that you do rely on Stokes a little more, or maybe Ben Hall really is the real deal and emerges from camp. But we'll find out here in a couple of weeks if that's the case. I mean, that'd be great. It'd be great for Michigan if he does.
I'm a big fan of CJ Stokes. So he the fumble against Maryland, he's not a guy that has struggled with fumbles in the past. It's not a guy they expect to moving forward. That was just getting coached up, right? Missing a couple games and whatever it might be with that. He has a skill set. Again, I'm not going to say he can be Donovan Edwards because Donovan Edwards was a 5-star running back, right? But like in terms of a running back and the way they hit the hole and the way they run and the ability to impact the passing game, Stokes has that ability. I think he was a little small last year. If you're going to ding him on anything, it was the ability to break tackles.
Yeah.
And he's added 10 really good pounds.
Yeah.
Right. He's 205 now, and he looks like a different running back.
Agreed.
And I think that's going to be a huge factor. I don't know that people realize how big Benjamin Hall is, though. Benjamin Hall is 234 pounds.
Yeah, it's all in the thighs, too, which keeps him moving and keeps the pile moving.
He's Corum, dude.
Yeah.
He is, right? Like the way he's built, I think in the spring game, people were like, whoa, like the way he was running, his patience and his cuts, right? So that's why I said, like, next year, that's year 1 and 2. It's possible they both can fill very, very similar roles to Corum and Edwards in terms of stylistically.
Right.
So I think they're both going to play a ton. And that's why I say it might be deep into the season before you start to see a serious carry split. I also think Hall's a freshman and he had a great spring game and he could have a good fall camp, and there's going to be no reason to rush him on the field, and he might not get a ton of carries at all. And it might surprise some people. Right.
Right.
Cole Cabana is the other freshman we haven't brought up yet. I think his factor, I still think, is in special teams potentially.
I agree.
He was an electric returner in high school. He's a little behind the 8 ball because he missed a little bit of spring or whatever, but he could get some carries as well. He was another one of those dudes. Matthew on Facebook pointed this out. When that roster came out, I saw 198 pounds. That was a little surprising to me. He was looking a little thin last year. So all these guys have bulked up. So we'll see. It's another example of what a great problem to have, right? Corum returns. Benjamin Hall surprises folks, and he's ready to contribute. Cabana's injury when that started trickling out, we thought that might be more serious than it was. Yeah. So just good to be loaded there. So, all right. Well, this just turned into a full offensive recap of the start of fall camp. So feel pretty good about it. Obviously, Josh, who is Michigan rolling out next week? We're going to start hearing from the players a little bit.
Yeah. Tomorrow, JJ McCarthy, Michael Barrett. There's 2 other guys I can't think of right now that are coming out. Hold on, let me look here. I got it right told me. Yeah. Okay. So JJ McCarthy, Zach Zinter, Jalen Harrell, and Mike Barrett tomorrow. So that'll be good. Things are getting kicked off, and we're fully into it.
And when's that? You said the scrimmage will be the end of next week on Saturday?
Yeah, I was told next Saturday.
Excellent. Yep. So we have started filling up our camp kickoff fall practice hub. That is always on our homepage at michigan.rivals.com. We have the depth chart in there, some position previews. Josh is going to link all of his intel throughout fall as that comes out. So again, we appreciate you guys watching us on YouTube. We appreciate you listening on Spotify, however you consume Hail to the Podcast, but we'd love to have you, if you aren't already a subscriber, over at michigan.rivals.com, so you have access to our intel and, of course, our message board community, the Den. You're going to want to keep up to date. Like I said, Josh is going to have press availability Monday. We'll start having quotes coming in for players, and as they start to pick up the full contact, we're going to start to hear a lot more about this roster and this team as it's starting to take shape. So, as always, for Josh, thank you guys for joining us on this episode of Hail to the Podcast.